Hello everyone and a good evening. I am Nayan Jain and thankful to JSC Corner for giving me guys to welcome our today's speaker and all participants in this webinar series. I hereby welcome all professionals across India into this session. A lot of issues professionals are facing, what type of accounts and records need to be maintained in this, and what are the documents department may ask at the time of assessment, search, survey and other certifications. So we had a great personality today to provide us guidance in this matter. Now I'd like to introduce today's webinar speaker, Mr. Ankit Kanodia sir from Kolkata. Now I telling about the brief profile of Ankit Kanodia sir. Ankit Kanodia sir is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and also qualified company secretary under the NCLT. Sir has additionally pursued LLB LLM degree from Vidyasagar University and got ranked in this subject. Ankit sir cleared the certificate course on indirect taxes from ICI and is a co-opted member of ITT committee of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry and also exchanged views in the CA studies of Ankit sir has also been invited to over 100 events across India to share the knowledge about GST purpose. He is also a subgroup member of the Indirect Tax Committee of EIRC of ICI for the financial year 15, 16, 16, 17 and 17 and also a special invited to the research committee of the EIRC ICI for the year 2013-14 and 15-16. He has been chosen a member of the Kolkata Study Group of ICI, New Delhi for indirect taxes. He is also a certified IT faculty of the ICI New Delhi. Ankit sir has authored two books on service tax, ready referencer, and Fair Acts, law point publications, and also published numerous articles in various journals and magazines. He is also the editor of monthly GST bulletin, GST Navigator from the House of SKKK Associates. Now I hereby invite sir to present the webinar and enlighten us with their knowledge and practical approach. Sir, please continue to present.
Thank you very much, Nayanji. At the outset, it is my privilege to be a part of this webinar series organized by GST Corner in this month. I saw some of the webinars which was done in the earlier week also. It is a very enriching knowledge sharing platform, I would say, and your daily updates helps not only professionals but maybe many other persons to be abreast of this ever changing law. So I thank GST Corner for the opportunity here. Now coming to the topic today. So accounts and records is correct. We will be discussing as to what are the legal provisions it is required under the GST law for a particular SSE to maintain the accounts and records. What type of accounts and records are to be maintained? But as Nayanji told me when we were discussing this topic that we need to emphasize on some of the aspects as to what are the practical challenges? What are the practical challenges which one may face when the department would come for audit? Because you know GSTR 9, 9C, 17, 18 is over, 18, 19 is due to over, maybe some extensions are in line, we will see in times to come. But yes, whenever now the department audit will start, in fact, I would share my experience in couple of departmental audits for 17, 18, which we have already done for our SSEs in Kolkata here. And I'll share some of the practical experience that we witnessed during those particular audits of some big companies there. Correct. So with this, I would start with the presentation. And first, we'll see as to what are the basic legal provisions, because in the presentation, I would be just discussing the legal provisions and the other aspects, the practical aspects, will take up as and when with the provisions as I read on. So the first section that we refer to here is section 35 of the CGST Act, that with the respective rule 56, which provides that every registered person shall keep and maintain at his principal place of business, as mentioned in the registration certificate, a true and correct account of. You see, there are certain important words here to be noticed. 35(1) is asking us to maintain at the principal place, and it is for registered person. There have been controversy in this law as to the definition of person and registered person. 35(1) is giving an obligation only a person who has taken a registration under GST, he has to keep these documents. For this, let us take an example here, is that suppose there is an investigation done at my business premises and I am not a GST registered SSE, but yes, from somebody's others investigation, the department has come to know about my PAN number or maybe my business dealings with that particular SSE. And in that case, department can come to me. In that case, I may not be a registered person. So in that case, the documents as required under 35(1) may not be available at my end to be produced to the department. But yes, the basic departmental details can be, basic accounting details can be sought for by the department, even in case of unregistered SSEs. However, as of now, 35(1) for registered SSEs. So what are the details they say? They say production or manufacture of goods, quantitative details. The quantity of goods manufactured. Please note, we need to link this with our GSTR1 and GSTR3B that we are filing today. In GSTR1, when we are uploading the invoice level details in case of B2B and in summary details in case of B2C, there is no mention of any quantitative details that we are giving, correct? However, it does not mean that you need not have the quantitative details. 35(1) gives you an obligation, I would say, that you have to maintain quantitative details of your goods that you are manufacturing if you are into manufacturing, or maybe for the purpose of trading also. HSN detail in GSTR1, I still see after 3 years of GST, many people avoid that HSN details because government itself has given a relaxation for 2 years in the annual return. Maybe it can come in for 1920 also. However, in HSN details, they are asking for quantity, but I, in my practical experience, believe me, have not seen many SSEs still giving the HSN details correctly in their GSTR1. So 35(1) tells us to have the quantitative detail of goods. For provision of services, whatever the services you have availed as well as you have supplied, so that is fine. Inward and outward supply of goods or services or both, that we have to maintain, which is called the ITC register. So inward and outward supply of goods and services, and in the last bullet you see input tax credit. So it tells us that two things are required to be maintained. First, that the details of the goods or services under bullet 3, and bullet 5, the corresponding ITC on the goods or services that you have purchased. So as of today, when we see what is the 2A, GSTR 2A, or for that matter 2B, which has been introduced by the department, you see what are the basic information there. GST number, the taxable value, the tax amount, the rate of tax, the place of supply, and the tax amount. These are the basic 5-6 information which is contained there. So keeping that in mind, also the government and the 35(1) is asking us to maintain the details of inward and outward supply of goods and services, maybe in the same format. So you need to have the basic details as to the GST number of the supplier, the invoice number, the invoice date. One important thing which should be there, but I, again, from my practical experience, I have not found it everywhere, is regarding the GRN date. So I will not discuss the basic concept of input tax credit. That is not the topic today. But as everybody of us know, that 16(2) says that your input tax credit can be availed only when the receipt of the goods. So suppose in my case, I am maintaining my input register for inward supply of goods, wherein I say the invoice date is 31st of March 2020, but I have done the GRN of that particular invoice in my books on say 2nd of April, when I have actually physically received the goods. But many a times when we do the GST audit or when we do a health checkup of our various SSEs, we find that the SSE is straight away acknowledge this point that the goods should have been received. So they say invoice date, they have already received the invoice over email. The goods are on the way. We see they have already taken the credit in the month of March, but 16 says no, you cannot avail the credit in the month of March. So that is the importance of inward and outward supply of goods read with input tax credit availed. You have to avail the input tax credit, but the sections of input tax credit availment has to be kept in mind. Fourth bullet is very important to my mind because it says stock of goods, particulars of opening balance, purchase, receipt, supply, goods lost, stolen, destroyed, written off or disposed of by way of gift or free samples, and the balance of stock. So you see this particular, the phrase that they have taken, goods lost, stolen, destroyed or written off or disposed of by way of gift or free sample, this has a direct bearing under 17(5). So many SSEs may say, okay, 17(5) is an ITC part. I'm not showing anything in my books as that I am selling something as scrap. Suppose I'll take you a classical example which happened in one of our SSEs recently due to this Amphan cyclone which came in West Bengal. So many SSEs, factories, many SSEs godowns were affected by this cyclone. So the finished goods, say, which was there in the godown, that was destroyed, you may say, partly destroyed, you may say, by the cyclone. So suppose I am a manufacturer of, say, zinc oxide, and I am selling that my sale price of zinc oxide is, say, 1,000 rupees per kilo. For just for the sake of example, I am taking the figures. And during the Amphan cyclone, I saw that zinc oxide has become wet. So the insurance surveyor came, and the insurance, everything was done. And finally it came to know, okay, the insurance company is telling, yes, we agree that your value of the goods has diminished. So the insurance is giving me some of the amount as per my insurance agreement. But my question is, what happens to the goods? What happens to the goods which has been affected by due to the Amphan cyclone? Whether I would say, what I would be doing with that goods is my next question. Whether I would be selling that at a lesser value, whether I would be selling that as scrap, or maybe I can reuse it in my manufacturing process so as to increase its validity, so as to increase its, bring it back to its original form. So various factors can be there. But suppose I am selling that as scrap. So 17.5, again I am saying I am not going into 17.5, but 35.1 says you have to have that stock, that if your goods have been lost, stolen or destroyed, or you are writing off that goods. So writing off does not mean that only written off in the books. Written off in the books, but if you are selling something as scrap also, paying GST on the scrap also, you need to have a proper records of that under 35.1. See, it is a very important section. Maybe today all of us are busy with the compliance work, wherein we see, okay, we need to file 1 and 3V. Today 19th, tomorrow is Sunday, so 3V आज कैसे भी रात को file करना है. Portal is giving their own issue. So yes, but when the department actually comes, or when as a chartered accountant you are doing the certification under 9C, I am sure that these are certain points which we need to ponder upon so that we can give actually a true and correct certificate as is required under 9C. Correct? Free gift samples. If you are selling in an FMCG, sample sale is very much there. So if a new product has been developed, say by a biscuit manufacturer, n number of biscuit packets are sold as samples so that the public can taste. It may be given as free with their main product. So all this stock of records has to be maintained, and including scrap and wastage. See, there is a specifically mention balance of stock of including raw material, finished goods, scrap and wastage. So anything, it is. I am not telling that you may not be paying GST on scrap. You may be paying GST on scrap, but the quantitative details of this claim, how the scrap has been generated, what is the nature of scrap, please ensure we have all those details with us. Coming to the next slide. Output tax payable. So when you are maintaining your supply annexure, when you are making your details of your outward supplies, then the output tax payable and paid would automatically come there. Import and export. So the government is asking that we have to maintain separate records for import and export. For export, yes, since you are into export, if any person is doing export of goods, you are having all these shipping bill details. But for export, please mind, export is still ruled by the Customs Act. IGST Act does not govern exports. So under the Customs Act, the proof of export is the EGM, the Export General Manifest, and not the shipping bill. So please note, when the department comes for audit, your EGM number should be updated in IceGate. Only showing them the shipping bill copy will not serve your purpose, because unless the EGM is there, it is not a conclusive proof that the goods have been exported out of India. So those details for export. In case of import, so import bill of entry is there for goods. For services, we are paying tax under RCM. But for services, for goods, I will not say much, because it is everybody has to file a bill of entry for goods, so there is no issues with that. But for services, yes, we need to be very sure with services part. In my experience, I have seen that a company who is into, say, hard coke manufacturing has subscribed to a magazine of Australian Coal Manufacturer or the Australian Coal Association, and has made the payment of the subscription through credit card online. And in the credit card, the statement, it is coming that, okay, $20 has been paid for the subscription of this magazine. As a GST consultant or as a GST auditor, you may say, you need to pay RCM on this if the company has not yet booked it. Because generally what happens in such type of transactions, the company passes a single entry for credit card. all the expenses, all the ledger heads debit to the credit card and credit card payment has been done. But it is our duty to see whether any RCM of import of service. Notified RCM, I know everybody is aware of notified RCM, there is no issue. Import of service is also a notified RCM, but yes, there are situations wherein people tend to forget about the import of service, the link of import of service. So maybe your credit card statement of your client would become important document for you to verify whether any foreign payments has been done through swiping of card or not. So import details has to be maintained properly. RCM, other than import, the RCM provision is there. I've already discussed. Relevant documents will go to in the subsequent slide. We'll see what are the documents for RCM. Advance received and paid. So if there is any advance you have received for supply of goods, or you have paid any advance to your vendor for supply of goods, you need to keep those separate details for the purpose of having the records as required under 35(1), along with adjustment. So I know GSTR1 will have these details, but government is asking you that you should have these details in your books of accounts also. Complete supplier and customer master, there is no issue with that. You can easily have that. And list of all additional place of business and warehouses. So if you are having a multiple GST numbers, so all those additional place of businesses, if you are having multiple place of businesses in the same state with single GST number, then all the addresses of additional place of business and warehouses should be updated in your GST certificate also. So these are the basic requirements which the law says, which has to be complied by a registered person when it comes to books of accounts. When it comes to the owner or operator of a godown or a warehouse or any other place which is used for storage of goods, maybe by a transporter or maybe by a normal SSC also, in that particular case, the following details, additional details like consignment note containing the name of the consignee, consigner, the registration number of the goods carriage in which goods are being transported, and all those, the place of destination has to be there. So this particular provision is for the transporter who needs to maintain the particular consignment note in the prescribed format. Next, 35(1) further says all books of account has to be maintained at the place of business, principal place, which you are declaring at the time of registration, and the relevant records at the place of business, additional place. So here lies the tragedy. I would say it is a tragedy. Why tragedy? So today everybody of us are working in ERP softwares. Maybe somebody is Tally, somebody is working Oracle, somebody is there in SAP, somebody is working in Navision, any n number of ERPs are there. So what would be the point of the department at additional place? So I can give you an example here. Suppose I am having my factory at, say, Calcutta, city Calcutta, and I have a warehouse, say, in the outskirts of Calcutta, maybe like 50 kilometers from Calcutta. I've added that warehouse as my additional place of business. So relevant records for the particular warehouse can be the quantity of the goods which is being stored by me at that warehouse, and the entry and exit, the receipt and dispatch of the goods from that warehouse. So that may be a requirement. The relevant records, when they say relevant records, for me the relevant record may be for the particular additional place of business. The SSC has to show that, okay, this is my warehouse, this was my stock of goods at my warehouse, this is how the stock of goods came, this is how I made the sale entries in my particular warehouse. So you may say the concept of branch accounting, sort of branch accounting. So all those details has to be maintained as per section 35. 35, again, one point they say there should not be any overwriting or corrections in the records made. So again, they are speaking this of manual entries. Today again in ERP, what is happened, suppose in SAP, if I passed an incorrect entry, I cannot delete it. There are restrictions for the same. So I would pass a reversal entry for the same. So it is particularly for those who are still maintaining books of accounts, maybe in hard copies or maybe in Excel sheets. So for them, this may be relevant. The books shall be maintained and shall be serially numbered. If it is again maintained manually, you should give a serial number to each of the volumes 1 to 3 as it is. And regarding the additional place of business, we have already discussed that what records can be maintained at additional place of business. But the fourth bullet says that suppose whatever you have declared in your additional place of business and principal place of business, but if any other record is obtained by the department from any of the places not mentioned mentioned there, then it could be presumed that that said document is being maintained by the registered person. So these cases actually come into light in case of maybe anti-evasion or DGGI cases, wherein say on a when the DGGI officers are doing investigation of a particular SSC and they found certain incriminating documents of any other SSC at his premises, then reliance can be placed in this particular section to prove, to say that, okay, if this is not your registered place of business, I would presume that this is your still documents because of the provisions under section 35. Coming to 36, period of retention. So period of retention is something which to my mind requires amendment. It requires amendment because the period of retention today is linked with the due date of furnishing of annual return, which everybody of us knows here that for 17-18 we have seen a extension of more than a year from the due date. For 18-19 it is already coming to a year, if not extended by till December. Maybe a single month extension is there on cards. So the law says that whatever are the books of accounts that we just saw, you have to keep it with yourself until the expiry of 72 months from the due date of furnishing of annual return. It is due date. It is not the date of furnishing, it is due date. So if that you have filed your annual return on say 10th of the September, but the due date is 30th September, so 72 months calculated from 30th of September and not 10th of September. So a win-win position for department. I would rather say whenever this story of extension comes in indirect tax, as consultants we are very happy, correct, everybody is happy, okay, we get some time. But the department is more happier than us in these particular cases because they are also getting the time under section 73 and 74 to issue the show cause notices. Because all the time limits under 73 and 74 is also linked with the issuance of, with the due date of annual return. So therefore I would say that at least 73, 74 provisions should be delinked with the annual return and made respective with the GSTR 3B return. God knows whether that will happen or not. But yes, we need to keep it for 72 months. And if at all your case is into any appeal or revisional proceedings or any tribunal proceedings or any court proceedings even for that matter, then you have to retain those particular documents for a period of 1 year after the final disposal of such appeal or the 72 months clause, whichever is later. So of course, later would be the 1 year, I would believe. But if suppose an appeal has started before 72 months and concluded also in the say 40 months, then 72 months clause will be the applicable clause. Now we come to the provisions. We'll just glance through the provisions of what is a particular for tax invoice. Just give me a minute. So tax invoice, I would not, see slides are there, but I would not take you all through all these slides. You may, the organizers may share their PPT with you all as and when they feel like, so you can go through it. But I am just touching this section because what are the relevant contents of tax invoice? That becomes important for us to note. So 31 primarily says, but at what time you have to issue a tax invoice. So for the goods with the removal of goods, you have to issue a tax invoice unless the government specifies otherwise. And for services, before or after the provision of services, but within the 30 days of completion of service, you have to issue a tax invoice. That is okay with us. Next, we say a revised invoice under Rule 53 has been stated. What is a revised invoice? Revised invoice may be you can apply for registration 30 days of becoming eligible for when your registration provisions apply to you. So between this period, if you have issued any invoice, you can issue a revised invoice. We'll go to the contents. Then they say you have to issue a composition taxpayer has to issue a bill of supply under Rule 49. That is clear to us. Receipt voucher, if you have received any payment in advance, you have to issue a receipt voucher. Now these are very critical. And I discussed the points regarding the practical issues that we will face during assessment. This Rule 50-51 would, and of course the self-invoice, the payment voucher under 52 and self-invoice under 9.3 and 9.4. This would be something which would be maybe causing a nightmare to SSCs, but I believe department would come to the rescue of the SSC also. that yes, these are procedural provisions. These are procedural provisions can never override the substantial provisions which are in the law. So if you, the department cannot deny you the ITC if you are not maintaining a self-invoice. You may of course prepare a self-invoice and show it to the department in times to come. But we should be very sure that there are provisions in the law which tells you to prepare a self-invoice. So 50, 51, 52 will go to when we go to the rules, but this clause F is very important for me, which provides that you have to prepare a self-invoice under 9394 cases for reverse charge. So 9394 as equivalent to 5354 of the IGST Act. So with regard to self-invoice, there are other controversies also. I'll take up that controversy in this particular slide only. So many people ask us whenever there is a departmental, maybe not a departmental audit, but maybe a professional is doing an audit and the professional finds that okay, an RCM has not been paid by the SSC. So the SSC's direct thinking is okay, it is RCM, so pay karenge, input mil jayega, correct? So the SSC thinks with that logic, but department may not always think with that logic, sir. So the thing is that what is the time period for availment of ITC? When the ITC can be availed in case of self-invoice for reverse charges, that department has not issued a circular, any clarification in this matter. Yes, initiation of GST, there were departmental tweets which say you can take the credit in the same month in which you are filing 3B. Those points are okay to me. But my point is, I am doing a payment of reverse charge GST after the due date of September return. So whether I can claim the credit. So a very litigative issue. Some people are of the thought that, okay, the relevant date, if you read section 16 and you take the document section, it says not the date of challan. The relevant date for the particular, for taking the ITC on reverse charge is the self-invoice, not the supplier invoice, but the self-invoice. So if I can create a self-invoice, when I came to know about this liability as on the date, though the expense has been booked in the previous financial year, today in this current year, I will make because I have not made the provision of the GST, I am making the provision of GST for the expense in the current year. And I am making the payment also in the current year. So can I treat that as an ITC of the current year? Even if it is after September of the current year, last financial year, then whether ITC can be availed or not. So contentious issue, again, it depends upon the volume. So if you will have, say, say your auditor has found an RCM of say 2,000 rupees, 2,000 may be material for some, it may not be material for some. I'm not going into that logic. I'm taking with a simple concept that I think we should take this credit and we should reverse the same in the same month in which you are availing, so that unless there is a departmental audit, and then you can re-avail it if the department issues any notices or memos to you. Then if the department does not issue a memo for any maybe interest also, at least you are saved by 16(4) time limit for re-availment of credit. So RCM self-invoice becomes very important in cases where I have missed the credit of payment of RCM and paying in the current year. I would go with the logic of preparing a tax invoice of RCM self-invoice in the current date and avail the credit and wait for departmental scrutiny for the same. Yes, as a prudent SSC, if you are availing the credit on such litigative points, it becomes your duty to intimate the department over by speed post acknowledgement due that yes, you have paid this amount and you have availed this credit. Then at least your bona fide is proof, and invocation of longer period may not be available to the department if they have ignored your letter of intimation also. So contentious point for reverse charge payments, we have to see how the departmental assessment actually takes this into. For 17-18, actually the department gave the date was extended till March of the next year to avail the credit, so people would have done most of the exercise, I believe. But yes, audit was not done for many SSCs till that period, so there are some cases there also. Current year people are aware of that, so I believe the compliance of 9394 has become simpler because of the law have evolved over a period of time. Similarly, refund voucher, payment voucher, refund voucher, when you are receiving a advance, you have to issue a receipt voucher. When you are paying the advance, returning the advance, because you have not supplied and the supply of goods or services has not happened, you have to issue a refund voucher. Now here I would again like to share some practical points that the law says, but subsequently no supply is made. So there may be a case wherein say I have received the advance in the month of February. I am a tour operator. I paid GST. The tour was to scheduled in the month of August current year. But since because of all this COVID situation, there is no tour happening, nothing is happening. So I am refunding the amount of the advance received to this to my customer. So in that case, if I issue a refund voucher, whether this would tantamount to adjustment of advance, to my knowledge, yes. So adjustment of advance can be done by two ways. It can be either done by raising of invoice or maybe raising of refund voucher. So if you are trying to adjust the advance without supply of goods or services, please note refund voucher is a very important document. Otherwise, your adjustment may not be allowed by the department. Even if you want to claim a refund of the tax by not adjusting in your liabilities, because you may not have future liabilities in as per current COVID situation. So if you want to have a refund also, which has been allowed by the CBC in the COVID circulars, then also this refund voucher becomes paramount document for you to take the refund. Payment voucher, I still believe it is an unnecessary compliance, because to all whatever you are paying to for RCM, you have to issue a payment voucher for single entry for the supplier. I do not believe that is a correct procedure which the law should envisage. Neither the department has come out with any detailed clarification on as to what is the objective of bringing this payment voucher. So we need to see how the government reacts on this. Credit debit note, I am not going to discuss. Everybody is aware of this provision. 34, you can have to issue a credit note if you have your value of taxable supplies has been shown more, or in case of sales return. And similarly, debit note, if you have shown your taxable supplies as well as tax as less, you can issue a debit note to the customer subject to the time limits mentioned. Now I come to Rule 46, which lays down the contents of tax invoice. So if you go through Rule 46, it goes till point Q. From A to Q, they are saying that this particular issues, these particular contents are the contents of the tax invoice. But reference here is invited to Rule 36(2). Reference here is invited to Rule 36(2), wherein the government brought a proviso, and in that proviso, I'll just read it for your convenience. 36(2) of the CGST rules. Government inserted this with effect from 4th of September 2018, and it stated, provided that if the said document does not contain all the specified particulars, but contains the details of the amount of tax charged, description of goods or services, total value of goods or services or both, GSTN of the supplier and the recipient, and POS in case of interstate, input tax credit may be availed. So 36(2) proviso inserted from 4th September 2018. GST law is there from 1st July 2017. There are judgments of Apex Court, High Courts, which says if there is a procedural law and there is any provision inserted, you may treat the provision to have retrospective amendment also. You can take the reference of Rule 6, maybe for Senate Credit Rules, Rule 6, wherein in 2010-11 there came an amendment for a proportionate reversal option, which the court of law held that it has to be applied retrospectively also, and it is a beneficial and a procedural law. So whether this 36(2) can be applied prospectively, has to be applied prospectively or retrospectively, this again when the department comes to audit we'll see. But as of now, Rule 46 has detailed contents, and we need to be very sure with the contents. At least 5 basic contents: the GST number, the taxable value, the HSN of the goods, the nature of the goods supplied. All these basic details, the tax amount has to be there. Similarly, for bill of supply, I'm not going into these details. You may just go through. Receipt voucher 50. So as I told you, whenever we are receiving the advance, the law says you have to issue a receipt voucher and you have to disclose these numbers in GSTR1. So it will contain the details of the supplier, the serial number, the date of issue, the recipient's address, GST number if registered, the amount of advance taken, and the total tax. So suppose you have received an amount of 1 lakh rupees. So You have to show that as cum tax and reverse and back calculate the amount of tax and all those particular place of supply details as is there in the tax invoice. Refund voucher, again it is important, as I told you, whenever you are refunding the advance for when you have not supplied the goods or services, maybe for any reason, then you have to issue the refund voucher. All these contents are similar to the tax invoice contents as well as to the contents of the receipt voucher. Payment voucher, as I told you, I still believe that this is not the correct position of the law that you have to issue a payment voucher. Maybe it may be a system generated voucher, but they want that whenever you are making a payment to an unregistered person or under 93942 registered also, you should issue a payment voucher showing these details. So eligibility of credit is not dependent for RCM on payment voucher, but it's a procedure which we need to follow. Device tax invoice, credit note, debit notes, we have already dealt. You can just go through these slides. I'm not going into details. ISD invoices, if you are input service distributor, you have to maintain the ISD invoice for the purpose of distribution of credit. Those provisions are there in Rule 54. I'll directly now go to Rule 55 now, which is a very important rule. And this rule, believe me, has come to application in n number of places, and various instances we have seen department has not agreed to the interpretation of this particular rule. Maybe in cases of when the goods are moving for, say, job work. So let us take an example. My manufacturing location is in West Bengal. I have appointed a job worker who is registered in Bihar. So I need to send the goods from West Bengal to Bihar to the job worker, the raw materials I am sending. So since it is not a supply per se, because the job worker would finish the goods and send back the same to me, I would be sending the goods on delivery challan, and I would be issuing the tax invoice. I would be issuing the e-way bill with the delivery challan option. The delivery challan, since these are reasons or not other than supply, I would not be mentioning any tax amount in my delivery challan. I would be only mentioning the taxable value and the quantity of the goods, and I would not be filling any CRSNI. Now suppose the goods are on movement from the West Bengal to Bihar. In such a case, during a check post comes, the so-called check post, I would say, because department says there is no check post today, but yes, the mobile check post is always available in the highways. So whenever the, say as a check post, the goods are, the truck is stopped and the officers do the verification, they say, okay, you are sending goods to job worker, and where is the tax invoice? What is the nature of the goods? If you do not have this particular delivery challan correctly filled, then your goods may be liable for confiscation under 129, search, seizure, all those procedures are there. But Rule 55 delivery challan is a very, very important document. Also with respect to job work, when you file an ITC 04, which you have to file quarterly as to the details of goods sent to job worker and received back, the challan number that you are issuing, when you read section 143, it says you have to intimate to the department. So your filing of ITC 04 is the intimation to the department that you are doing job work, that you are engaged a job work, I would say. You have engaged a job worker to do the manufacturing activity on your behalf. Plus 143 is very clear in that respect, that if the job worker is registered, then you need not register in the particular state, in any other state. But if it is in the same state and job worker is not registered, you have to disclose that as your additional place of business. So delivery challan, job work is one industry. Exhibition, when the goods are taken for exhibition, say there is an exhibition in Bombay, I am in Kolkata, I am taking goods to for exhibition purpose. I am not sure what goods would be sold by me. I have not taken a CTP registration at, say, Maharashtra, because the goods are, I am taking only the goods for only viewing purpose. The goods cannot be sold in the exhibition. So in that particular case, I would do the movement of the goods under the delivery challan, come back from the exhibition, issue a return delivery challan, and take the stock back in my books of accounts. So 35(1) stock of goods, please note. So a delivery challan is also a very relevant document to prove all these different type of transactions. So with this, I was with the Rule 55 particular documents. For the last point is the semi knocked down, completely knocked down in batches. When the goods, suppose I am imported say 100 tons of a particular product, but it cannot come in one batch. It is coming in smaller batches of, maybe it will come over 10 days. Then also for the movement of the goods in the batches, the delivery challan is required. Yes, in that case, for import, the bill of entry becomes a relevant document for us. Now with this, I have in this 40 minutes, I have discussed the basic provisions which I wanted to discuss as to the maintenance of accounts and records. Now, coming to the practical aspects here, I have already discussed some of the practical aspects as and when I found suitable. Apart from this, I will take up your questions. You will, which as and when it comes up. But what we have actually seen in the last couple of audits, departmental audits for some of our SSCs, which we have done during this pre-lockdown. It just started pre-lockdown and just coming to a conclusion now. Is that the department is giving heavy reliance on the GSTM, the GST audit manual, which was released by the CBEC for the departmental officers. All the formats that they are giving has been taken from that. So they are paying a very heavy reliance on the GST audit manual, which was available for in public domain somehow, and people have access to it. So it does not say that what are the penal provisions, how you conduct the audit, but it has given thrust on the document part. So in one of the SSCs, what happened? That the department came for audit, they checked our input tax credit invoices, everything was fine. Somehow they came up with a query as to what goods that you have purchased on which non-GST goods. Means they wanted to check our exempted input supplies. My exempted outward supplies, I do not have any issue. But a point came up that, okay, in your GSTR 3B return, when you are filing your GSTR 3B return, you have to give disclosure as to what are the interstate and intrastate exempted and non-GST inward supplies that you have received. So I saw that yes, the SSC has not filled up any such supplies in the 3B return, because as per the SSC's logic, it was a point that, okay, these are information which may not be readily available at the time of filing of 3B. However, when the department is conducting your annual audit, or maybe when the SSC's GSTR 9C is being done by the consultant, then I believe this becomes a very relevant part, because department in the audit part, see, when a 9C has been certified by a chartered accountant, I do not find any other income reconciliation gap would come. I find that yes, all income reconciliation, yes, there may be issue of POS, the nature of tax, those are different issues. But during the department audit, what we saw, a heavy thrust was put up for the input tax credit part, and the rule 36(2), which I discussed with you, the provision which came into effect from 4th September 2018, wherein all the details were not mentioned in the particular ITC invoice, but ITC was availed. The department has clearly stated we will go with the contents of Rule 46, because during the period of audit under 17-18, this provision came from 4th September 18. The department has not allowed us the beneficial provision. What was the SSC's issue? The SSC was not able to produce the original copy because the SSC supplier had given the invoice copy over email. There was no dispute as to the receipt of the goods. There was no dispute as to the non-payment of the to the vendor. There was no dispute as to the non-reflection in my GSTR 2A. But still, a memo was issued stating proper tax invoice that with 31 and 46 has not been established, so the ITC seems to be ineligible. So a memo was issued because of this COVID period has not been finalized. But suppose you receive a memo because you are having a duplicate copy of invoice, or maybe your GST number is missing, or maybe your GST number is incorrect, or address is incorrect. So there have been n number of such cases in excise service tax regime, wherein the court of law has over and time held that procedural compliance cannot deny me the substantial benefit of ITC. So yes, with due respect to the provision that GST number has to be there, correct GST number has to be there. The original copy of invoice may not be every time available. So in such cases, the credit have been availed on Xerox copies. And if the department goes to deny it, I will again say the history of the departmental litigation in SESTAT is not very good. The departmental records say that more than 90% of the cases at SESTAT in the indirect tax regime is being lodged by the department. The success rate is very less. So if such type of frivolous litigation again starts in GST regime, I still have my doubts that this would again go to the GST 80, which somehow has not yet been formed, and would lead to unnecessary litigation at all ends. So you have to satisfy the department whenever a memo has been issued on these grounds by taking reference to the old law only, because today you cannot give a judgment also on your own. But the concept of the old law, which is still very much relevant in GST regime, we have in my particular experience, I would say I fought a commissioner appeals of GST not being formed. I am not going into GST. I have not filed an appeal, but in the which the commissioner appeal in the order has summarily dismissed by stating a single line. By stating a single line that the judgment referred by the appellant do not belong to the GST period and hence reliance on the same cannot be put. So I was very astonished to see such type of remarks. But yes, every officer has its own thinking. Some officers assessments also. But you need to be very sure that with the departmental audit, this litigation with regards to the nature of documents, especially with respect to ITC, is something which would be there, because when the department comes for audit, you would be giving them the 9C that sir ye dekhiye isme hamara income reconciled hai pura. ITC also you have reconciled it totally in totality, but you may not check the eligibility, you may not have checked the eligibility. So the SSC, the departmental officer, will 100% check your eligibility. And eligibility, when I say eligibility, yes, 17.5 is one of the part of eligibility. But POS 16.1, the conditions of section 16 becomes very relevant. As I give you in the starting, I discussed the example of GRN. So the departmental SSC, the departmental team in our case, asked us for the document to show that when the goods have been actually entered, because they saw that the invoice date was of month end. They saw that the invoice on which I've taken the credit in the month end, the invoice date was also the month end and the goods were coming from Noida to Calcutta. So they were of the belief that if the goods have been issued despite on 30th or say 31st, how can the goods be received on the 31st in Calcutta? So there a memo was issued that the credit you seem to have awarded credit earlier than allowed. But please note here, I still do not find any provision in the law which tells me to restrict my ITC for the particular month to the last day of the month. It was specifically mentioned under the Senate Credit Rules 2004 that the credit of a particular month, credit has to be availed as to all the invoices booked by the end of the month. Only that credit can be availed for the purpose of payment of taxes. Till now, I do not find such provision under the GST law. Maybe it would come up in times to come, or the department will clarify. I have seen people taking a view that credit can be taken till the date of GSTR 3B payment. So I do not watch that particular view because of simple reason that okay, I am paying tax of a particular period. That would mean okay, I will never pay the taxes of the current period with the current month input. Suppose my purchase of a particular period is 100 rupees input and my output is to 190, and my purchase of the next 10 days is more further 100, then how would I justify my logic? So coming back to the GRN example, so it becomes very important for us as a consultant or maybe as a professional or maybe as a businessman also to see that if I am doing a GRN, if my invoice date is month end, I have proper documents like e-way bill copy if applicable, the challan, the truck documents to show that the goods were indeed received on the last day of the month. It may happen, yes, there are fast track courier services wherein you may receive the goods. But if you are not able to prove it, see, department will issue your show cause on two grounds. First, they will demand the tax. that okay, that particular month tax has been short paid. And of course, interest and penal provisions is there. But what would be your counter? You would say, okay, even if I say this credit has been availed earlier, but actually I have utilized this credit for that particular month's payment. So your claim would be that, okay, you may charge me interest for a particular month. That credit would have been available, eligible to me in the subsequent month. So in the subsequent month, I should have utilized it. So maximum department can ask me for a interest of the difference of the date of the actual availment till the date of the next month of filing of 3B. But yes, department will never exceed to this point. They would say that that particular month tax has been short paid. So a notice would be issued on that ground. Now you have to fight it till maybe appellate forum to get justice. Again, old regime. Your erstwhile excise and service tax regime comes into play here, wherein the n number of judgments on this ground is there. That in such cases, ITC, the only interest can be confirmed, tax cannot be confirmed. Next, when I come to the documentation point, I would take you to some examples which we have seen during this point of search and seizure, detention and confiscation cases under section 129. So in one of the cases, what happened, and there is a recent judgment also came for Hindustan Coca-Cola. There was a High Court judgment, Kerala or Karnataka High Court, one of these High Courts at least. But then it happened that the goods, when they are being moved from Karnataka to Kerala, the goods were intercepted in Kerala on the ground that the classification of the goods as per the officers who detained the goods in Kerala was incorrect and the tax should have been paid at the higher rate. So the SSC moved High Court and the Kerala High Court, I think, gave a judgment stated that officers who have intercepted the goods under 129 cannot challenge your classification, because the confiscation can be on the ground that if there is no proper documentation which is required as per the law. But if you have proper documents, if there is a classification issue, then the state officer of Kerala should have communicated with the Karnataka jurisdictional officer, and then the action has to be taken by the Karnataka officers and not the Kerala officer. So the High Court correctly stated that in such cases the goods cannot be detained. Coming to the documentation part here, in this case you see the goods were properly accompanied with the delivery, with the invoice and with the waybill. So since these were properly accompanied, the department, the High Court ruled that it is not a case of detention cannot be made in such cases. Again, a very interesting judgment came up of the Kerala High Court again in Shrimara Industries case 2019, wherein my goods were confiscated under 129. 129 lays down a procedure of detention that, okay, if you come forward and pay tax along with penalty of 15% or 100% penalty as per the officer, as per the legal provision, the goods would be released. And subject to a time period giving you 15 days from the date of actual detention. So in that case, what happened? The goods were detained, order was issued that, okay, you make the payment of the total tax and 100% penalty, then they will release the goods. Otherwise, the provisions of 130 for confiscation would come up, seizure would come up. The SSC was, what did the SSC did against that particular order for payment? It filed an appeal before the Honorable Commissioner Appeals by making pre-deposited of 10% of the amount disputed. So the total tax and penalty, so only tax 10% was disputed. So 10% of the amount of tax was deposited. And now, when the department started, the department would detain the goods since 15 days crossed and they started to make the recovery by attaching bank account. The SSC went to Honorable High Court and the High Court gave a fantastic judgment that 107 and 129 are two separate provisions. 107 says, if in under any proceeding, any SSC is under an appeal, after depositing the 10% statutory pre-deposit, then no further recovery can be taken by from the SSC, by the department. So in this case, the SSC stated, okay, I have disputed this, So I paid 10%. So the question of recovery by the department for the 100% tax penalty cannot arise. So to that extent, the writ petition was allowed. But for 129, the SSC also made a plea in the writ petition that okay, since the matter is under appellate proceeding, the goods may kindly be released. The High Court stated no. 129 is an independent proceeding, and 129, if you want to release the goods under 129, you have to follow the procedure under 129. You cannot take a plea that the matter is under 107, so the goods can be released. So the High Court dismissed the writ petition for this extent. So I discussed this judgment for the purpose to explain you that this documentation under GST is of very great significance. Why I would say significance? Because if you can prove that you have proper documents, yes, procedural part is different. There may be some corrections, but yes, if you can prove that you have made substantial documents, you have prepared all the self-invoice, you have all the reverse charge documents with you. In such cases, I believe, when the department also comes for audit or when they ask for a document, for in one of my cases, the department has made a letter. It was not an audit letter, but from the range. They told us that in the letter that since there is a mismatch in 2A and 3B, they wanted all the input invoices that we have availed credit on. And that would go into say 10,000 of invoices. But as a prudent SSC, I had to submit that to prove my bona fide that yes, I am not availing any regular credit. Something is not coming in 2A, maybe a technical problem also. But yes, I am eligible for my credit to that extent. So here lies again the importance of document. So whenever a document is being sought for, during assessment, they will ask for all these books of accounts as per 35. Please note this, the books of accounts for scrap, free goods, sample is very important. You have to show that yes, there is a separate entry in your ERP to account for this. So with this, I believe I have done the deliberation for about an hour. I have shared some of my experience into this, what is the importance of documents. Now I would ask the organizers so that make this floor open so that we can take up the good questions of the audience. If they have any technical doubts on this particular topic or any other topic for that matter, we may take the questions correctly so that we can have the same answered in the balance time available with us.
Okay, sir. I will open the chat box, sir.
Yes, thank you. So the first question is by Mr. M.H. Pandya. He says in 1780, a party issued job work invoice without charging GST. In 2021, he came to know that it will attract GST after 2 years. He paid GST with interest. Now he wants to collect GST from the debtor and want to issue new GST invoice in this current year. Can he do so? Can the recipient claim ITC? So, sir, to your query, I would say the supplier has paid the tax with interest. That is fine. But see, revised invoice provision, as I told you, is only for registration cases of 30 days. There is no option to issue a revised invoice. What you can do in this particular case is that you can collect the GST component from your customer by issuing a debit note. But if you issue a debit note, again the provision of 16.4 has to be kept in mind, because 16.4 they say they have linked the debit note also with the date of invoice. So if your debit note is in current year and the date of invoice pertains to 1718, the recipient will not be eligible for credit today. They have delinked this, but that delinking has been done only with effect from the current year, not from the retrospective effect under the 16.4 if you read the provision. So raising of debit note is not also a solution. Raising of revised invoice, there is no option. Only option is with your current invoice. If with your current invoice, if you are giving any supply in the current period, then only you may they collected with the current invoice by showing a debit note of the current invoice that you have charged less or maybe certain value enhancement has to be done. But at customer's end, the customer may not be interested in that because, see, one point is that you have paid it suo moto as per your query. 73, 74 proceeding has not been done. So to that extent, the customer may avail the credit, but the customer will always be in a point as to maybe department later on may not allow the credit be linked with the provision of 16.4 because this is a provision, this is a case of 1718. This is my reply to you, sir, in this case. Next is goods converted into sample by manufacturing concern and supplier to sister concern with goods for marketing the goods. Which is what is the GST implication on the cost of sample goods to manufacture as he supplies to related party nil value. Goods converted into sample by manufacturing concern and supplied to sister concern. Okay, so what I get from your query is that you are a manufacturer, you have manufactured certain goods and you are selling the goods as sample to a related party, correct? Then what is the GST implication? So first of all, when it is a sample sale, it will always have nil value. You cannot charge values from your, maybe it is your related person also. But if it is a case of pure sample sale, then you are not allowed to charge any tax. You cannot collect any consideration in that case. If you would have collected consideration, then the provisions of Rule 28 of the valuation CGST rules for valuation with related party would have come in. But in this case, there is no particular point for collection of any consideration. So in your case, from the supplier point of view, whatever ITC has been used for the manufacture of such goods, I would say such ITC would require reversal under 17 because 17.5 for the that particular clause states goods. Now goods may include FG, finished goods, as well as raw material goods. So to my mind, that particular goods that you have given a sample to your sister concern for marketing without consideration, any input that you have utilized for the purpose of manufacturing of that particular goods would require reversal under section 17. In case of purchase of 5 lakhs, the supplier did not raise e-way bill and now GST officer has seized the vehicle at purchaser premises. Okay, so the question which I could relate is, the supplier has issued the invoice to the customer. The goods were value worth 5 lakhs and the goods have already come up, has been received by the recipient. And at the recipient premises, the department has come and found the goods to be with a tax invoice but without a way bill. So they have seized the goods. That the goods are accompanying, the goods are without way bill. So sir, first point here, a good question I would say, but I would put it correctly. If the goods are not intercepted during the movement, see, you need to go to the provisions. When I say interception, 129 confiscation provisions are there. But if you, section 67, which is the power of inspection, search and seizure. This inspection, search and seizure, read with 129, 130, can be done when the goods are in movement. If the goods are not in movement, but say department has come to your premises, and by checking the input tax credit, they have checked, okay, the value was more than 1 lakh rupees and you have not been able to show the way bill. So as a recipient, what are the remedies available to your end? This should be the exact question I would say. So as a recipient, I would say that my contract with the customer, why the contract with the supplier, was delivery of the goods till my premises. Now when the goods were actually delivered, the way bill was not accompanied with the goods at that moment of time. So, but the goods have actually been received by me. I have made the payment through banking channel. There is a proper valid tax invoice. So the question of inspection, sir, season and the denial of credit cannot happen in the first instance. In the second instance, the government may max, to my mind, say this is a procedural lapse under Rule 138A, because under 67 read with 138A, it says every movement of goods has to be accompanied with a waybill. So you may say this movement of goods was caused by the supplier and he has not accompanied the goods with the waybill. This is not at your fault. If the movement was at your end, to this the government would say, but you should not have received the goods without waybill. But this cannot be a case of clandestine removal. Please note, since you are booking the goods in your books of accounts, you are availing the credit, it automatically means that the supplier has to pay tax on the same. If the supplier is a fraudulent party and he has not paid tax, then in your case, the department is correct in denying the ITC to you. But in all such cases where the post-assessment department checking is done and they cannot find a waybill, maximum the procedural law can again come up, but the recipient cannot be denied the credit on the same on the ground that waybill is not accompanied. This is my submission. Now there's a next question is on sale on approval basis. We are removing material on DC along with material. Once customer approved, we do tax invoice and share to customer. Here on DC should be charged tax amount while moving the material. Sir, I would say when you read Rule 55, the law is very clear that tax amount has not to be mentioned if the goods are for reasons other than supply. So in your case, the goods are not for supply, it is for approval. The goods may not be approved. So I would say there is no requirement at your end because this is for reasons other than supply. One school of thought may say this, I would say. Another, when you read Rule 55 threadbare again, an issue comes, amount of tax is mentioned in the Rule 55. In the bracket they say not required if the goods are for reasons other than supply. So whether sale on approval is for reasons of supply or not should be the first question. So to my mind, sale on approval basis is a supply transaction. Job work is not a supply transaction, it is a job work transaction. So in your case, if you are moving the goods on delivery challan to the customer, and because after 6 months, if it has not been approved, then you have to pay the tax. So it would be better at your end, you may show the tax amount in such cases, wherein you know that, okay, this has gone on approval basis and has to be approved within a period of 6 months. So to my mind, in your case, I would have shown this as a particular tax amount I would disclose in the delivery challan also. Next question is, okay, just a second, I missed. There's a repeat question of 5 lakh, I believe. Party engaged in road construction work in different states. He has state-wise registration for the working sites, but he has office in only one state. He can keep all records at one place? Sir, if you have taken state-wise registration, then for all practical purpose, you have to keep all your records at all the states. Because when the department comes for audit, say at Maharashtra, you cannot say that, okay, my records are at Calcutta, you come to Calcutta for the purpose of physical verification. If you are taken state-wise registration, you have to keep state-wise document because each state is deemed to be a unique GST number. And each state has been deemed to be a unique SSC, each GSTN is deemed to be a unique SSC for that particular state. So your plea that you can make the records at one place, no, yes. ERP today, I believe again, there's a branch concept you can do in ERP. You can produce the ERP to the department when the department comes for audit, but physical documents, like documents for ITC, output documents, those has to be shown physically to the department at that particular state. Penal action if the party does not prepare consignment note wise invoice in case of exempted goods. He prepares consolidated invoice for entire quantity, say sale of salt 200 metric ton. So, sir, in your case, if you are into exempted supply, you have to issue a bill of supply. And exempted supply and you are registered under GST, then only this question can come up. Because if you are registered under GST, there's an exempt supply also, there's a taxable supply also, correct? So for exempted supplies, you need to issue a bill of supply. But say you are selling, like in your example, 200 metric tons of salt, correct? It is not going under a single truck, it is going under multiple vehicle. So you may issue a single invoice, but please ensure this has been sold through a single day. The invoice has to be issued on a particular day, because maybe you will be allowed to show the multiple transportation option in the waybill. And though it is exempted, waybill may not be required. That may be the next point, because since it is exempted, you need not require waybill. But in that case also, if you are not sending the goods in a single day, if the 200 metric ton movement has not started on a particular day, then you are not doing correct. Then the general penalty for non-issuing of violation of procedures under 130 on the section 31, general penalty of 25,000 each under each act may be imposed on. So restaurant service under schedule 2, it's a deemed composite supply of service with the rate mentioned under notification 11 as 5%. So whatever they supply, in fact, this is a litigation that I told you that we are fighting at Commissioner Appeal, and the order has come. In our case, in the particular restaurant, the supplier of the restaurant was also supplying cigarettes. So the cigarette, the department came, the anti-evasion wing came, and they stated, okay, you are supplying cigarette. So cigarette is the tax has to be paid at 28% along with cess. But we told that, okay, it is a composite supply. Somebody is not coming in my premises to buy a cigarette. It is being consumed in the restaurant only. I am not doing trading of cigarette. So for me, we paid GST on 5% on sale of supply of cigarette also. But the department says, no, it is a particular commodity, defined commodity. To which we stated, okay, in that case, if I sell, say, cold drinks also, cold drink is attracting 28% as well as cess, then why should I pay 28%, 5% on cold drinks you are not demanding? To that, the department says that under schedule 2, the composite supply of service, they say food or any other like goods for human consumption. So it says cigarette cannot be tantamount for goods for human consumption. That is their own logic. We are fighting that. We have to file a GST tribunal for the same as and when the tribunal is actually formed. So in that particular case, I think we need to particularly, just a second. Sorry for the interruption. So I would say 5% for the whole bill restaurant service is 100% correct, sir. How to prepare invoice in case of reverse charge on import of services? Sir, self-invoice, you have to prepare self-invoice. The contents will be as good as of the tax invoice. Just prepare a self-invoice and pay reverse charge. Give a particular number of the self-invoice and the invoice date for the same. No particular format established by the law. We have employee transport service from unregistered vendor, and vendor is not charging GST in this bill. Seating capacity is more than 13%. Can we calculate GST of 5% and take the ITC credit? So again, sir, this is a contentious issue. With the amendment in rent-a-car provisions from 2019, there are different aspects of the same, I would say. Department is itself not clear, so they amended it retrospectively twice in December again and issued a circular. As of today, what it stands is that in case of passenger transport, in case of rent-a-car for passenger transport, if the supplier is to pay, tax at 5%, then it is under reverse charge. So in your case, if the supplier is unregistered, I would say you need not require reverse charge at all, because the RCM for rent-a-cab has been issued under 9.3 and not 9.4. The notification for RCM. So 9.3 is only in case 9.4 could have been a case wherein a registered person or unregistered may be a case for 9.4. But in 9.3, I do not find the government has that particular power to notify that unregistered reverse charge can be made applicable on the recipient in case of rent-a-cab, because the provision says who is to pay 5%. The supplier of service who is liable to pay tax at 5%. So in your case, the only good point is that since it is more than 13-seater, you can avail the credit. There will not be any dispute. On that ground, you may make the payment of RCM and avail the credit. Otherwise, to my mind, RCM from rent-a-cab from unregistered supplier is still not under RCM. If we export goods, which document is required to maintain? Sir, export, as I told you, the basic document, shipping bill, your commercial tax invoice, commercial invoice is there. Packing list, everything is not concerned with GST. For refund purposes, for GST purposes, I would say EGM. So shipping bill may not contain the EGM number. You can trace it with the IceGate website. Take a printout of the same and put it with your shipping bill copy. Nothing much for other than that for export purposes, sir. GST refund of duty and cess is possible. Yes, GST refund of cess is also possible. There is no bad time. There is no restriction on the refund of cess also. Is it necessary to prepare reverse charge invoice and show in GST? Yes, sir. In document issued, you have to show the self invoice for reverse charge. Though the GSTR1 has nothing to show with the liability of reverse charge, but in GSTR1, in the document issued, you have to show the self invoice number for the particular month for reverse charge. In case of discount received as reimbursement for discount given on cars from company, will it attract 28% as per parent company is paying with 18% GST? I'm not clear with your query, sir. You have received discount by in the nature of reimbursement, means you are raising a tax invoice for the same. And in your tax invoice, you are the company is asking you to charge 18% GST instead of 28%. So the transaction that you are asking ideally should be done through a credit note by the supplier, because discount has to be issued in the nature of credit note. And if the credit note can be issued with the principal invoice details, then yes, 28% deduction can easily be made. But in your case, why is the parent company paying 18% on what ground? Reimbursement for discount, because discount is directly linked with the car price. So it cannot be any business support service kind of invoice that you can raise. If it's an agreement that okay, you are raising an invoice say for promotion services and business activities so that the goods are promoted, the cars are promoted, then 18% I can understand. But it is a pure in the nature of discount, and I think 28% should be there. Sir, what will the treatment for bundle sales like a gift pack where there are 3-4 items with a different GST rate? Sir, this is a question of mixed supply. If it is a gift pack, then the law is very clear. Then the highest rate, suppose there is a gift hamper which has say some dry fruits, some chocolates, and some cold drinks. So cold drinks attract highest rate of 28%. The entire gift pack will attract 28%. What value should we show in GSTR1 for export as taxable value? Sir, it should be the value as per shipping bill. Because if you show any other value, validation with IceGate will not be done and error will be thrown. And then in the subsequent month, you have to amend that invoice. So it will, of course, it has to be the shipping bill value. FOB, CIF, depending upon your terms of contract with the customer. So Nayanji, any further queries? Yes, there is a query. Good. If technical services provided by GST holder to US and another GST holder will render service to GST holder, is it exempt? If technical services provided by GST holder to US and another GST holder will render service to GST holder is, so I'm not clear with the query, but what I could understand basic is you are supplying services to a technical services to United States, somebody at United States, and you are receiving that services from some other person. There is no question of any exemption in that regard, sir. It is not like a contractor and works contractor, subcontractor. No, no such exemption to my mind. In case of reimbursement of expense invoice, do we charge GST if supplier has not charged GST in his invoice? Sir, if the supplier has not charged, then how can you charge? Generally, what is reimbursement? But you have to read the definition of consideration. The definition of consideration in GST is very wide. Any amount other than pure agent should be taxable to my view. Please read the definition of consideration under section 2 of the CGST Act. Can department raise issue if RCM supply mentioned in exempt column in 3B as no separate column is available? Sir, if you are paying tax, then it cannot be shown under exempt column, I believe. You have to show under inward supply for reverse charge. But again, this is just a disclosure error. You should write a letter yourself to the department and intimate it by giving them through speed post. There will not be any other queries, I believe.
Sir, hello.
Yes, Nayanji.
Sir, this was the last query we had. We are very thankful to the sir for presenting this webinar by picking their time from the busy schedule and cover all the major issues and challenges in the accounts and records under GST. We are also very thankful to all participants for attending the webinar. Please do share your feedback related to the webinar for the GST corner. We have also upcoming webinar. Kindly also join us. Also, if anybody wants to join GST subscription plan, then they can contact us. We are very thankful to the sir for taking such a wonderful webinar.
Thank you, sir.
And covering the practical topics here.